You are listening to the Mark Guzman Podcast Experience. Okay, so my guest today is a director of medicinal chemistry who has spent her life using science to find cures to some of the world's worst diseases. She's worked with companies such as Amgen and
Flexus and
Flexus Bio. And in 2016, she joined science startup. So help me pronounce this. Ideaya?
It's Ideaya.
Ideaya
Daily.
Biosciences.
Yes.
Ideaya Biosciences is an oncology-focused biotechnology company committed to the discovery of breakthrough synthetic lethality medicines targeting DNA damage and repair for genetically defined patient populations and for enhancing immunotherapy response and immuno-oncology therapies targeting the tumor microenvironment. Wow. Welcome to my guest, Hilary Beck. So thank you for coming on to the podcast.
No, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So you're here with your family and your twin girls. They're 5 now, right?
Just turned 5, and we had transitional kindergarten orientation before we came here.
Okay. Where did you go to school, and how do you focus why did you focus on this specific study?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll start with where I grew up.
Okay.
So I grew up in Nebraska. It was a very nice place to grow up, but I always thought there was something more to the world besides Nebraska. And so I decided when I was in Nebraska that I wanted to be an oceanographer to study the oceans because you can't do that in Nebraska. So that was my way out. So I went to Boston University, which is a really great place to study. And I did start out doing oceanography or marine biology, but I realized quite quickly that I got seasick.
Okay.
It's kind of a problem for a degree in marine science. But I did also really like chemistry. And when I entered Boston University, I tested into an advanced chemistry program there. So I slowly, in my sophomore year, switched my major from marine science or oceanography to chemistry. Chemistry just really clicked with me. I really liked it. I like solving the problems, and so I decided to study that. Then, after my sophomore year, I was really fortunate. I was able to do an internship at I guess at the time it would be considered a biotech company. It was called Ariad Pharmaceuticals. It recently got bought maybe 2 years ago. And there I worked under a medicinal chemist. And I was like, I loved it. I had spent the whole summer there. It was my favorite job ever. So at the end of that internship, I asked him, excuse me, how do I get your job? What do I have to do to get to do what you get to do? And he said, okay, finish Boston University, go to graduate school, and then you can do my job. So then after that summer internship, I focused on, okay, what do I need to do to get into graduate school? And what graduate school should I go to? So I was pretty sick of the snow after growing up in Nebraska and spending 4 years in Boston. So I kind of drew a snow line and decided if possible, I would only go to schools that were south of that snow line. And I decided to go to the University of Texas at Austin.
So you went complete opposite from snow to complete sun.
Yes, complete sun. It did snow, I think, one time when I was in Austin, but it's very rare. So I went to Austin, and my mentor, who his name was John Buchanan at Ariad, told me to study organic synthesis. And so the reason we study organic synthesis is to learn the tools that we need to make the molecules that might become drugs. So I did hardcore synthetic organic chemistry at the University of Texas. I was there for 5 years. I learned a lot. At the end of that time, I decided it would actually be a good opportunity for me to do an additional study. So that was actually at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. It's what's called a postdoctoral fellowship. And there, I really honed in on my skills. That fellowship was funded by the American Cancer Society. So that's why I got interested in doing cancer research. And after my time there, I started applying for jobs. My husband is from California, so he wanted to move back to the California area. He's in electrical engineering, so it made a lot of sense for us to live here.
And both of you went to the University of Texas, right?
Yes, he did an MBA at the University of Texas, and we met during his last year of his MBA. My
Longhorns,
year.
Right?
Yes, we are Longhorns.
Big college football fans too. I know that.
Yes. I mean, I grew up in Nebraska, so that's still one of my favorite teams. But I do root for their Longhorns when they're not playing the Cornhuskers.
Yeah. So what's a medicinal chemist, or what's medicinal chemistry?
That's a good question. So Medicinal chemistry is the study of chemistry or making of new drugs. So our goal is to discover new drugs that will be used in humans and fight any kind of diseases. As simple as, well, headaches, that's not really that simple either, but cancer, diabetes, people are trying to do Alzheimer's, ALS.
And then you worked at Amgen before too,
I
right?
did. So Amgen is a large, what we call biopharma. It's actually the largest single-owned biopharma in the world. So they do both large molecules, biologics. So those are injectable proteins or antibodies as drugs. And the people who discover those are usually in biochemistry engineers or biology engineers. And then what I do is called small molecules. So it's molecules that could be injected, but most likely are taken orally. They are actual synthetic compounds made through chemical reactions. The biologics are made through biological processes.
Okay. And at Amgen, do you always work on the cancer research there? Or
No, so Amgen, at the time I worked at Amgen, they were focused on 4 therapeutic areas. So oncology is one of them. Also inflammation, metabolic disorders, which would be like diabetes or cholesterol, heart disease kind of thing, and then neuroscience. And I actually was there for 8 years and I worked on every single one of those areas. So some companies have chemists focus on a specific area, like you are a cardiovascular chemist and you only work on cardiovascular drugs. Amgen was different. They said a chemist is a chemist. Chemists can solve problems, chemists can make molecules, and they don't have to just make oncology molecules. I was on an oncology project for 9 months. I switched to a diabetes project for 3 months. And then I went to a neuroscience project for a year and then went back to oncology.
what was your favorite project?
So my favorite project was actually oncology. The second oncology project I was on was an MDM2 inhibitor, and that actually made it all the way to human clinical trials. It's called AMG 232.
Okay.
And during that time, I had learned a lot during my first couple years at Amgen, so I felt like there's a big learning curve in medicinal chemistry because we're trained as synthetic organic chemists. So we have to learn medicinal chemistry on the job. And I had reached the point in my career that I had learned a lot of the basics of medchem, and so I could really apply them, and that the molecules I was designing and making really made an impact on that program. And it was a challenge. A lot of companies since the 90s had been working on that target, and we were able to come up with what I think is the best MDM2 inhibitor in the world.
Okay, now you're gonna have to explain MDM2. Now, I try to do a little bit of research before this podcast, and so I Googled it, and it's mouse
Minute domain, maybe.
minute,
Yeah, so,
yeah, mouse domain minute 2,
yeah.
yeah, and that's as far as I got. After that, I got lost. So,
Yeah, so there's
can you explain that a little bit more?
I can try. I'm not a biologist, but I will do my best. So there's a protein called P53, which is an essential protein in your body that regulates transcription. And MDM2 has the important role to regulate P53. And so sometimes in cancers, P53 gets out of sync. So one way, cancers mutate P53 to make it inactive, and then your cancer can just keep growing and growing and growing. Or they upregulate MDM2, and then that has the effect of letting your cancer cells just grow and grow. So the goal was to create an inhibitor of MDM2. It would only work in P53 wild type cells. It won't work in the people who have mutated P53, but we can test people beforehand to figure that out. And it was shown to work in preclinical models, and it did go into human trials.
Okay. And then, so at Amgen, I believe, do you work on one of the projects that came out with a vaccine for HPV? Is that correct?
I did not, no.
Okay.
I just know of, right when I was entering industry is when the HPV vaccines were becoming popular. And
Okay.
so a lot of the companies that I'd interviewed with, especially on the East Coast, that was a hot topic that they talked about, but I wasn't involved. That was before my time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What was one of the biggest accomplishments there at Amgen, like in one of the projects that you worked on?
This is very technical, but there's a key carbon substitution on MDM2 that myself and a modeler essentially invented. And without that key substitution, the final molecule would have never been made. And also, I think the project wouldn't have been able to even move to the next milestone.
Okay.
So it's this quaternary methyl group that is my claim to that molecule.
Okay. And then, so in everyday life, how can this MDM2 and the P53, how can all that apply to the average person or fighting cancer or any diseases?
So the average person it's not going to affect them. Amgen's goal is to treat grievous illnesses. So if you take Amgen's medicines, you're in a pretty bad situation. So the average person doesn't want to be there. But maybe they have relatives or friends or colleagues that have some sort of cancer or other grievous disease. So in the case of MDM2, it would be, or what we thought would be a person with a P53 wild type tumor that we could be able to treat.
Okay.
I haven't been so that was back in 2013, I'm guessing. But yeah, that when it was launched or the clinical trials were started. And so it's been a while. I'm not still at Amgen, so I don't know the status of the compound right now.
Okay. Okay. And then after Amgen, you left and...
I did. Amgen went through a lot of changes, and a lot of upper management left during those changes. And I took the opportunity to join some of my colleagues from Amgen at a startup called Flexus. When I first went to Amgen, I thought I would be at a large pharma company forever. But I just started to realize that there's a shift going on in the industry, and a lot of startups are doing really exciting science. And that's really what I wanted to do. And that's why I went to Amgen, was to do really exciting science. And I saw the opportunity at Flexus to go back and get to do really exciting science again. And I had a blast at Flexus.
And what's the project you worked on there?
So at Flexus, I worked on the Ideaya inhibitor program. Flexus was a short-lived company. It only lasted for 18 months. I was there for 11 of the 18 months. And the reason it lasted such a short amount of time is because our team was very successful, able to come up with this Ideaya inhibitor, which was highly sought after and ended up in the sale of the company to Bristol Myers Squibb.
Okay.
So BMS now owns that compound. That compound's now entered phase 2 clinical trials and doing quite well from what we've seen.
Okay. And what are some projects you're working on at the current company you're with?
So I can't disclose what I'm currently working on, but I can tell you that what Ideaya is interested in, which you mentioned, is 2 different platforms for oncology research. One is synthetic lethality, and the other is immuno-oncology. And we're hoping to be able to do something in the intersection between synthetic lethality and immuno-oncology as well.
Okay. Okay. Can you explain that a little bit more?
I can try.
Layman terms.
Yeah. So we'll start with synthetic lethality. So synthetic lethality is the idea that cancer cells are mutated, and that's what makes them cancerous. And it might be possible that those mutations make those cells vulnerable. So if we can find a pathway that we can inhibit or enhance that would kill those mutated cells, then we would leave the normal cells alone and only kill the cells with that mutation.
And this would be a completely different type of treatment besides chemo and radiation, correct?
Yes, it is different than chemo and radiation. There's a new compound that entered the market just a couple of years ago that's a PPAR inhibitor, and that's the same mechanism of action that we're looking at.
Okay.
So that works in breast cancer and BRCA1 mutation. So we're doing the same thing, looking at cancers, looking at their mutations, and trying to find a partner pathway that would kill those cells.
And what are you finding with cancer mutations? Are you guys finding like a cause to the cancer mutations, or basically just tracking it and seeing how you can reverse it?
Tracking it and seeing how we can kill it. So we not reverse it, but just get rid of those cancer cells from your body so your normal cells can continue to grow and you can be healthy with the cancer cells eliminated.
Now, would this be, in theory, I guess, because you're still testing and still discovering, would this be a healthier alternative than chemo and radiation?
It is. So chemo and radiation don't have the ability to discriminate between normal cells and cancer cells. And so a lot of people get quite sick on chemo and from radiation. I mean, that is currently in a lot of cases the front line. So it's we have to always patients also always need to be treated with the frontline therapy until we find a better one. But if synthetic lethality ends up being better, then it in some cases could become the frontline.
Okay. I saw a recent report. I forgot what channel they had it on, but they were basically talking about something similar, except using the patient's own cells
Mhm.
to actually combat cancer.
Yeah, so I think that's in the immuno-oncology
Okay.
field. So we can switch to that. So Ideaya is doing synthetic lethality, but also immuno-oncology. So
Okay.
the immuno-oncology is actually
So they do both.
we do both,
Okay.
and it's a unique company. Usually, small companies focus on one area of research, and like they'll focus on neuroscience, but then specifically Alzheimer's. So they're just an Alzheimer's company. It's unique that we're doing two platforms at the same time.
Okay.
But that was something that attracted me to Ideaya, that we're not just putting all our resources on one area, but we're spreading out the risk, but also the reward. So immuno-oncology. So it's now known that cancers do something really sneaky, and that they trick your immune system into not realizing that there's an invader in your body. And so researchers have figured out in some cases how to turn that trickery off. And so then your immune system will fight your cancer.
Wow.
It's pretty so this is what Jimmy Carter used in order to cure his cancer, and it does work, and it's revolutionizing the way that we're treating cancer patients. But unfortunately, it only works in a small percentage of people, so up to 30% of cancer patients. So
Why is that?
we don't know yet. We don't know why. We don't know. There could be several tricks that the cancer is doing, and we only are the one that the trick or the drug that is approved. There's a few drugs are approved, but it's the same essential pathway to reactivate the immune system. So we don't know if maybe some cancers have found other ways, and that's what we're trying to figure out. So it's these 70% of the other people that this immuno-oncology is not working for, that we see this opportunity.
And I think that's one thing that's so crazy about cancer and just a whole bunch of different viruses and diseases is that they will mutate
Exactly,
themselves.
to get around whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's very interesting to see how in, let's say, for example, here in America, you're working on a cure for cancer, yet do you see it also mutate in other parts of the world as soon as, or do you see the same type of virus disease mutating in
It
different
actually
ways?
it's way closer than that. It mutates in the person's body.
Okay.
So we can kill a cancer. The cancer can go into remission, and then years later, the cancer can come back. It's the same cancer, but now it's mutated into something else.
Okay.
And so, yes, we see mutations all the time, and we can test for that preclinically. We can test to see the cancer cells go away. We leave it alone. Do any of them come back? And can we retreat them, or now are they mutated and resistant to the treatment? And so
Okay.
there's chemo-resistant cancers.
Okay.
Um,
Now, going back to synthetic, how, like, you're able to target the actual cancer cells. How does that work?
So because the cancer cells are mutated cells, and so we're relying on whatever that mutation was. Can we find something that will muck up that mutation, and that cell will die? So a lot of the mutations we're finding involve proliferation of the cells, and so if we can mess up the proliferation, then only the cells that are trying to grow really fast, proliferate really fast, will get killed, and the other cells should be okay.
Okay.
That's the theory. We still need to prove that it works.
Okay. And then you're a director at your current company.
I am. I'm a director of medicinal chemistry.
Okay. And then what's your day to day look like on average?
So the one thing I love about my job is day to day is completely different. So I'm literally at the forefront of medicinal chemistry. I'm making compounds. My team is making compounds that nobody else, we think, is making in the world.
How many is on your team?
I have 3 internal chemists on my team, and then we use contract research organizations that we also direct and have them. We come up with the ideas, they do the synthesis, and then provide us the compounds. But it's not, I don't just work with chemists, right? It's a multidisciplinary team. So I have chemists, I have people who do biochemistry, chemical biology. We also have what are called pharmacologists. They're the ones who um, work on the preclinical models. We have biologists. I have immunologists that I work with. And then there's the people that deal with the financing and the money.
Okay. Do you work a typical 9 to 5 or
No.
no?
I don't know if anybody works a 9 to 5 these. Maybe high school students. I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't work a 9 to 5. I'm very fortunate that my husband and I do a very good job co-parenting our twins. And so we take shifts. So he does the early drop off. I go in early. I do the afternoon pickup, and he comes home later. And we make it work. Science is really exciting for me, and it's really hard for me to turn it off. So after the kids go to bed, I'm usually reading something or designing something or thinking
It's
about
definitely your
something.
passion.
It is my passion. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, is there a lot of competition in the field that you're currently working with?
Yes. So what is unique about Ideaya is I think I could say we're the only company doing these two things at the same time. So there are other companies that are specifically focused on synthetic lethality, and then there are a lot of companies focused on immuno-oncology. But what makes us unique is to be able to do both at the same time, and to really resource both platforms at the same time. But yes, there is always, if there's not competition in a biotech space, you're probably not working on the right target, I would guess.
Okay.
There's always a chance that somebody's going to scoop you. Basically, you guys are working on the same thing at the same time. The U.S. and world patent law is it's the first to file, but the filings don't get published for about 2 years afterwards. So you could be working on something that tomorrow gets patented, and then they own that chemical space. And you have to start over. But it's because what we're doing is so important.
Yeah. Let's go into the study of science here. I know it's very obvious. It's important that people study science. In your opinion, what can like the current education system do to improve the study of science? Because I think we definitely need a lot more people like you, more companies to invest in this type of research. So what can the education system do to help curate like future scientists?
I really benefited from my internship. I sometimes think back, if I hadn't have done that internship, would I be where I am today? Would I have found exactly what I love to do in the drive and the desire to accomplish what I'm accomplishing? So I would recommend that we highly encourage internships. I did mine as a sophomore in college. We've had at my past companies, we've even had graduate students do internships. But I think even high school students could do internships, and just education in science is a long haul. It's a marathon, but if you know what's at the end of the tunnel and what you get to do on a daily basis, if you get through that algebra class or that calculus class or that chemistry exam, I think it would be
It adds a purpose to get through that.
and influential.
Yeah.
In people's lives.
And does your company offer internships?
We've thought about it. We haven't yet. So we actually just moved in August to our permanent location. Before that, we were in an incubator space, so we wouldn't have had space.
Where's the new location?
We are in South San Francisco on Sierra Point.
Okay.
Exit. A lot of the biotechs are in South San Francisco. That's where biotechnology was created there, and everybody wants to be there. So we now have our own permanent space there, and we have a lot more room. But Amgen has internships. They've had internships for, I'm sure, decades.
Now, do they offer it to high school students or no?
I think what they do for high school students is offer like shadowing thing, where a high school student could come in and see what a day-to-day job is like. And
that would be fun for anyone to do.
Right. When I was actually a grad student, we had Girl Scouts come into our lab and see what we did, and just to know what other jobs are out there. I mean, we don't do chemistry at home, right? We do chemistry in a very controlled, safe environment. So it's not something that people would would even know what it looks like or what these people do.
Yeah.
So,
So for someone young that is thinking about getting into a career that deals with science,
mhm.
what's one of the best tips that you have for them?
Do an internship and take a lot of math and take as many science classes as you can.
How many years of schooling do you do?
So I through high school, and then I did 4 years of undergrad, 5 years of PhD, and then I did this postdoctoral fellowship, which was a little bit over a year long.
Okay, so a lot of
A
schooling.
lot of schooling. So I'll say in the U.S. In chemistry, the um, PhD is partially funded by the institution and also by grants. My postdoctoral fellowship was also funded, so that means that I didn't pay for the classes I took or the hours of classes I took, and I also got a stipend to live on. So
So the
it's
costs may not be as bad as it seems in.
the cost is not bad. I mean, you're not making money. You're scraping by as a grad student, but it was fun, and um, I got a great education and a great job out of it. But it's not like med school or law school or MBA where you're paying thousands of dollars out of pocket
Yeah.
to complete. And that's at least for chemistry in the US.
Okay. So I want to get your opinion on this. As somebody who uh, works on cures and vaccines, what do you think of the current um, anti-vaccination?
That's so
I want to
that
get your opinion on it
no
too,
and
because you
yeah,
do have 5-year-old twins.
I do, and I don't know, Mark. You probably don't know this. But my twins were actually born with an immune deficiency
Oh, I
that
didn't know that.
that I had, and my cousin had. And so because of that, so it's an immune deficiency that we outgrow at 2 years old. But the first 2 years of my life and my twins' lives, we didn't create antibodies. So the vaccines that people get didn't work for us. So because of that, we had to be careful with who my twins hung out with. We had a nanny, so they weren't in school, and I at parks and stuff just tried to make sure that they were safe. So people who don't vaccinate their kids, then when they do get sick, they could get my kids sick. Even though I want to vaccinate my kids, and I did vaccinate them, the vaccines didn't work. It didn't stick for them. They're now older. Their immune system has kicked in, so that's not an issue. But the idea behind vaccines is to have a herd vaccination, so that vaccines don't work 100% of the time. But if 100 people get vaccinated, then the 5% that it doesn't work for won't get sick because the disease won't spread. But if everybody is not doing what they should be doing, the vulnerable population, such as my kids and myself and my cousin when we were little, would have gotten sick. So I think it's sort of a societal responsibility that we want to protect each other. That's the society we're in, and that you should get vaccinated.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's even a spike right now of polio. Is that correct?
I
I
don't
read
know.
that.
I don't.
I read that recently that there's a few cases of polio popping up because of
Yeah.
anti-vaccinations.
I mean, there's always measles I hear about getting
Yeah.
popped up, and
And then if the majority of the population doesn't get vaccinated, then it allows for those viruses to also incubate and mutate.
Yep. And then yes, yeah,
Yeah, and then you're back to square one.
right. And all the people then would not would not have protection against the mutated forms. Yeah.
And the theory that vaccinations cause autism, that's a big one, which
So it has been disproven. It's been published that the person who did that research falsified data. That unfortunately does happen a lot in science. Like you said, it's a dog eat dog world, and some people take cuts and shortcuts to try to get ahead. But science always wins out, and we always figure out who plagiarized, who cut corners, who falsified data.
now
and they
isn't
get
there a
found out.
body of scientists that review things published in journals?
There are. So, well, there's two types of journals. There's just regular journals. The New York Times is a journal. But in
So
most,
anyone can basically publish if I wanted to
if
publish
you
a
want to,
science
yeah,
study.
yes. But there are peer-reviewed journals. And so those are the journals. There's something we call impact factor in science. And so the journals that are harder to publish in have a higher impact factor. And so these peer-reviewed journal means that at least 2, perhaps 3 scientists outside of your field, outside of your company, not associated with you at all, and anonymously read your manuscript, check it for mistakes, check it for falsified data, and allow it to be published, or allow it to be published with specific revisions or reject it.
Are they required to do or replicate the testing?
Some journals they are. So there are journals we have in chemistry that are specifically around the practice of a specific reaction. And in those, you have to have 2 independent labs reproduce your results and get the same results that you got. And then it gets published. And so that has a really high impact factor because we know if I go to that journal and I do the reaction, well, at least 2 other people have done it outside of that lab and it works.
Okay.
But that doesn't the case for a lot. So we actually had a review done at Amgen, and this has been published, that a lot of the biology models that people were following, we couldn't reproduce in-house. So it just depends on the field in the journal.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the biggest problems with science. As much as science is proving a lot of things, is the fact that people can really just come up with data on their own and publish it in smaller journals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do it in a lot of, and that happens.
Yeah. I mean,
but
like that
I don't
one.
read those journals.
Yeah, like right now we're drinking a Malbec wine, and like that one journal report that came out that for every glass of wine you drink, it's like 1 hour in the gym, and they base it on the Let me see if I get this right. Resveratrol that's found in wine, but I actually pulled up the actual study that they based it off of, and no joke, you would have to drink about 15,000 bottles of red wine to get the same equivalent that they were injecting to mice.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of mice, why are mice used so many times in labs?
Because they're small, and there are specific mice that we use. They're bred specifically for research. They're not mice that you find on the street. They're highly controlled supply of them, and yeah, they're used. So the amount of drug that I need to give to a mouse compared to a human is minuscule, and so I don't have to make very much in order to do my test if I'm going to test it in a mouse.
Now, is it also true that their neurological structure or biological structure is similar to humans?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I would guess not.
Okay.
But I'm not a mouse biologist, and I work with mice biologists. I could ask them.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what's your prediction for science, like your field of science, for like the next 5 to 10 years? And then we'll take that a step further and see where you think this is going to go in 20, 30 years.
Yeah, so I think the next 5 to 10 years, oncology is going to be a really, really important area to do research in. There's a lot of breakthroughs coming down the pipeline that we can then apply to our research endeavors. And so I think that
one of your daughters just walked into the room.
Okay, that's funny. So I think oncology is next 5 years really hot place to be. I'm very hopeful that neuroscience will be next. Alzheimer's is a huge unmet medical need. ALS is a huge unmet medical need, and I'm hoping that in the next 10 years we'll have enough scientific knowledge to be able to tackle those.
Do you think we'll have cures to a lot of these major diseases in 50 years?
I hope so. I'm very optimistic about oncology. I think we've learned a lot, and things are starting to go well.
It's just amazing, like the rate of technology and the rate of science, like how fast it's improving.
It
So
is.
I would imagine a lot of these cures really come out in the next 50 years. I mean, I was even reading something where they were talking about the average lifespan of humans right now, especially here in the U.S., is about 74 years old, I believe. And they expected by 2029, at the current rate of science and medicine, for that number to be around 99, 100 years old.
I need to start saving my money.
Yeah, we're all going to have to be working a lot longer, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then that's by 2029 is what they're saying. Now, that might be a little ambitious. I mean, let's say 2040, but still, if you get to 2040, then what other advances are coming out? I mean, it's just amazing, everything coming out.
Would be great for our children. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Now, of course, that brings up a lot of ethical questions into science, because there's a whole, well, I mean, we've all seen stem cells and the whole discussion back and forth between stem cells. Well, how far do you want to go with
Right.
that? Do you currently work with stem cells?
No, no, we don't need to. Um, we use cancers that were donated by people who donate their tumors to science. So there's a tumor database that we use.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
And now, are these people that pass away and they
We
donate
don't
their
know.
body
We don't know. It could be either. Their tumor could have been, let's say they had
removed?
breast cancer and they do a mastectomy, and they donate the tumor to science.
Okay. And then these tumors are tagged, put into a database, and then shipped out to various labs?
So we use the genetic information
Okay.
in the tumor. But there are companies that do ship the tumors around.
And I assume the whole genetic mapping, like the technology, how that's improved, has really helped your industry.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
greatly.
absolutely. It's so much cheaper and faster now to do genetic profiling.
I remember when they first announced that we're now able to actually read someone's DNA, break it down into code, and they were happy that they can get it done in 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that took years to accomplish. Years. 2 different independent groups.
And now how long does it take?
A couple days, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're not screening a whole genome. We're just doing the cancer screens, and that's pretty fast. We can send that out to a lab, and they can get us the information back in a couple days.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty fast. So in your study, are there any ethical issues that you have to deal with?
I don't think so. I mean, I can say that I've heard of ethical issues, but those are not the companies or the people that I want to work with. And so as a scientist, I make sure that my collaborators and my coworkers are ethical. And those are the people I hang around with and are in my network.
So there's no like ethical issues in terms of like the type of testing and studying that you're currently doing?
So the research that we do is highly regulated by the government because our goal is to go into humans.
Okay.
And so there are requirements by the FDA on what type of experiments and results we have to have before we can even start in the human population. And then our human testing is 100% regulated by the FDA.
And doesn't that take like 2 or 3 years to go through that before they even get close to approving something?
Oh, no, decade.
Oh, a decade?
Yes.
So you have to go through a decade of human trials.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. But there are what they call breakthrough status. So if you can get breakthrough status, it can rapidly speed up the process.
Now, what would be the difference between, you know, a normal process and a breakthrough?
A breakthrough would be something that's going to change somebody's life. So if you can prove early on in your trials that you are prolonging people's lives, then you will get fast tracked. But if this is just a medicine that helps people with wrinkles, that's not going to save anybody's life. It's going to take you at least a decade to get through your trials.
Okay. So a decade, though.
A decade. So there's 3 stages to clinical trials. So the first stage tests the safety of the compound. That's phase 1. Phase 2 tests the efficacy, or how does it work in a small group of people. And then phase 3, how does it work in a very large group of people? And the FDA helps you determine how big you have to go. Depends on the risks associated or that they think could be associated with the drug, and also what kind of population you're going into. If this is a cholesterol drug, everybody's going to be taking it, then that trial is going to be much larger than, let's say, a ALS drug where it's not very many people get ALS. Or
Yeah.
so it takes a decade is
To go through all those stages.
those 3 stages. So oncology, if you're a successful oncology program, you can shorten that because you would get breakthrough status.
Okay. Okay.
But it's
yeah.
everybody's
The entire family is waving at us right now.
yeah, I mean, you have to think that the FDA is set up to protect the U.S. population, right? So they want to be very careful about what they're approving to protect us.
Yeah.
I'm sure before the FDA existed, there were people selling these snake oil treatments you've heard about, and people were dying because of the things that they were.
Yeah, I've definitely heard, and this is recent in the last few years, of people that praise the U.S. for the FDA and how strict they are with clinical studies, but then a lot of people that also criticize us for having, you know, having to go through, for example, 10 years worth of studies when, hey, there's something here that could save someone's life now, yet they can't dispense it because they're still going through trials.
True. And it's very expensive, right? These clinical trials are paid for by the companies that are developing these drugs.
Yeah, and that's another thing. If you're a smaller company and you might have a cure to something or something that could help a big significant portion of the population, but if you can't afford these trials, you're kind of stuck.
In a way, but Big Pharma has figured that out. And so they use their economic resources to help smaller companies.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what happened with Flexus. So BMS had one of these immuno-oncology drugs. The IDO inhibitor should enhance their drug. So they used profits that they had to buy Flexus so that then they have access to, now they are going to take the responsibility of developing, but then they would also get the reward of the profits of selling our IDO compound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I read somewhere where a scientist's life consists of 50% fundraising. Is that true? Do you deal with fundraising, or does that mainly?
I don't. So I have a fantastic CEO who does that for me.
Okay.
But I had to, in my education, have funds. So I was, like I said, a research assistant and a teaching assistant to pay for my graduate work. And then as a postdoctoral fellow, I got a fellowship from the American Cancer Society, and I had to write proposals in order to get that. So I think it depends on what kind of scientist you are. So academic scientists definitely have to spend a lot of time getting funding.
Now, is
Because
there
they're like a private entity, right? They are funding their own research, so they have to get people to fund them.
is there like a database of investors that invest in pharmaceuticals or biotechnology?
I know there's a network. I don't know if there's a database, but
Okay.
I mean, the people that I work with or have worked with in the past have a network of investors that they rely on to invest in the companies, and then the investors get paid off when either the company goes public and has an IPO round, or when there's an acquisition for a large sum of money, then the investors get paid off.
Now, your current company right
Yes.
now, I know you guys have some really big investors. You were just mentioning your CEO goes out and raises money,
Yeah.
but do you also raise money or take donations from the public?
We don't. We're a private company. And so we are funded through investment firms.
Okay. Okay. Now, are most companies in your field private companies?
Yes.
Okay.
Or public. So then it would be on the stock exchange, so people could buy stock.
Okay. Basically own a share of the company.
And own a share of the company.
Yeah. Okay.
But if people do want to invest in cancer research, I would recommend they or not invest, but donate. I would recommend the American Cancer Society. That is a really great organization. They funded my postdoctoral fellowship, so they fund basic research, but they also fund clinical trials. They also fund helping patients with resources, and fund doctors. So by giving to the American Cancer Society, you donate to any of the large.
They spread the funds
Yes.
across many sources.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've interacted with them.
But they paid a portion of your schooling then.
My postdoctoral fellowship, they paid for it. The
Entirely?
Entirely, and
Wow.
I got a stipend, and they paid for the equipment I needed to use and the research that I did. But for them, it's like it's training the next scientist to do cancer research.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's their goal is to cure cancer, and so they've got to train scientists to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So aside from your current field, are there any other sciences that you're really interested on, or that you have an eye? Because you mentioned that at nighttime you like to sit down and read something about science.
Yeah.
So what has your eye right now?
Astronomy.
Okay.
Especially with the eclipse coming up, I guess on Monday, the eclipse.
Mhm.
But I mean, because of the work I do, I think I'm at the forefront of chemistry. The compounds I'm making today are compounds that people in the world are not making. I'm at the forefront of that. But the forefront of the universe is this astronomy.
Do you know any scientists in that field?
My grandfather worked at NASA.
Well, he worked at NASA, right?
Yeah, he worked at NASA. So that's definitely dear to our family's passion.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's talk about the eclipse. What's catching your eye about this eclipse?
So I'm definitely jealous of my hometown. So Lincoln, Nebraska, where I grew up, they're gonna get a total eclipse on Monday, at like 2:00 in the afternoon. Perfect time, bright sky, will go dark. My mom now lives in Colorado. She's actually driving to Wyoming to be able to experience the eclipse.
I know a lot of people here are going up to Oregon.
My research advisor that I had at Amgen, he's driving to Idaho or Nevada. He's on the road to go see this eclipse. So definitely jealous of the people who have the time and can get on the road and go see the whole thing. I have a feeling we're not going to see much in the cloudy Bay Area. It's 10:15.
Yeah, Sam and I were talking about it earlier, and what did you mention? We can get 80%.
Something like that, yeah.
If we can see the sun.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there won't be a whole lot of fog.
Yeah. So kindergarten, transitional kindergarten's on Monday, first day for my kids. We have an orientation, another one with the after school program. So hopefully we'll catch it. I mean, I don't have any fancy glasses. We'll just try to make a paper.
Sold out pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just try to make a paper box that we can poke a hole in and try to check it out.
Yeah.
But I mean, the eclipse it's definitely close to us because it's involves Earth and the sun. But the stuff that people are doing, looking past our solar system, trying to find more planets.
Yeah, the whole Kepler, right?
Right, and then the whole how did life happen here and not anywhere else? And what did it take for life to happen
Well, I would say
here?
technically we don't know that yet.
We don't know that yet, but just to think of the probability and how many, what had to happen for life to start here.
Yeah. In a way, like if we truly found out that we were the first life beings, in a way that'd be really neat and cool factor to it. But it would be a little disappointing to know that we're literally the only ones.
Yes. The other component is time, right? So the amount of time it takes for us to reach far in our solar system and reach back.
Have you been reading what some of the new theorists have been talking about as far as solar wind powered engines or fusion engines that could possibly propel our ships pretty close to the speed of light?
But the speed of light's actually slow compared to the size of the universe.
And the universe is growing faster than the speed of light, yeah.
So even if there is other life out there, it might not be in our time spot that we could access because we have such limited space of the entire universe. But that's another thing that interests me.
Yeah.
With small kids and my job, I don't get too much time to think about other science, but when I do in the future or when I retire, it's definitely something I want to become more involved in.
There's an article that you should check out. I just saw it this morning. I didn't have time to read it, but they were talking about a few scientists that have been doing some studying, researching, and they believe that time actually has, like time itself,
Mhm.
has two dimensions to it. And based on their research, they're saying it could theoretically lead to, well, we may possibly be able to travel back into time or
Mm.
forward into time based on these two dimensions. So,
Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
It's a
Yep.
good movie.
Yeah. Um, okay. So, one thing we like to do is a little bit of diving into some pop culture.
Okay.
And being that you're in science, I'm going to ask you just a few questions to get your take on this. What is your favorite science fiction movie?
That is a good question, and I'm totally blanking on the name. Contact.
Contact.
So it's Jodie Foster.
I remember that movie.
Yes. And I read the book, and Jodie Foster does a better job at telling the story than Carl Sagan, who's the author who wrote the book.
Really?
Yes. It is my opinion, I don't think he has the ability to write about what it's like to be a woman in science as well as Jodie Foster acted out that position.
Okay. Interesting.
And I saw that movie actually when I was an intern at Ariad.
And that's the one where she built the device.
And then it got blown up.
Blown up.
Somebody else built the other device.
Yeah, and then she met her father.
Yep.
And then the recording was like 3 hours worth of recording, but they just saw her fall through, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's Did she falsify data? I mean, there's so much of science that's in that movie. Especially at the beginning, she's working alone, listening for these noises. A lot of science we do, especially at first in my training, was alone. Now I really like it. I get to work in teams. But there's still parts that I do alone. I do designing alone. I invent molecules that we're going to make.
Now you mentioned she portrayed a woman in science.
She did,
what do you mean by that?
So historically our field is a male-dominated field. Even when I was definitely an undergrad, and even a little bit when I was a grad student, I didn't have a lot of female mentors to look up to. I knew I wanted to do this job. I knew I wanted to have my mentor's job, but there's no other women in that role. Can women even do that? Well, I mean, I thought, of course we can. But she went through those feelings as well. I think there was a scene where she was like the only woman in the room presenting her research. That happens to me all the time.
And do you just get a lot of stares, like people don't trust you because of that?
I don't think I do, but it would have been nice to have women that I could have looked up to in the roles that I wanted at a company. There's very few female CEOs at large pharma or even biotech companies.
Well, what's great is that you can now be in that role and inspire other people.
Right. And that's what Jodie Foster did in Contact.
Yeah. So, interesting.
Yeah, I think that will always be my favorite movie.
And
that's my favorite movie even outside of science fiction.
Okay, hands down, that's your favorite movie.
It. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing else compares.
Okay, what's your least favorite science movie?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably science in every movie. But yeah, I don't know.
What was that one movie that Neil Tyson deGrasse criticized? Was it Gravity? I think it was Gravity.
Gravity. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, wasn't it George Clooney and
the Sandra Bullock?
Sandra Bullock, yeah.
Yeah, and they played. Yeah, I didn't.
Well, the big thing that he had about that was the part where George Clooney was floating away and she couldn't pull him back towards the space station.
Yeah.
And so you had to let him go. So I think he criticized that, saying in real life you just have to tug him and he wouldn't float away.
Yeah, I think Neil Tyson deGrasse he went onto Twitter and he basically said, okay, here's the reasons why this movie is not accurate. And it was interesting, and he meant it as, oh well, these are interesting facts that you may want to know why this movie is not accurate. And I guess he got so much like just
Flack.
negative feedback from people saying, well, why do you got to criticize this? And so anyway, that actually worked out in his favor because now there's YouTubers and podcasters that actually bring him on and will ask him, hey, can you analyze this movie? What's wrong with it? And so
Oh, okay.
it's actually
Yeah.
it worked out better for him. But yeah, that was a movie that he basically pointed out some inaccuracies. And
Yeah, we don't watch very many movies because we don't have a lot of time, and so I don't spend time watching bad
busy
movies.
with twins.
Yes, busy with twins and life and research, and you can ask my husband. Typically, I don't make it through movies. I fall asleep. So the last movie we watched, The Big Lebowski, I think I made it 5 minutes
Okay.
and fell asleep. Last night we were trying to watch America's Got Talent. We both fell asleep 9:30 watching America's Got Talent.
You guys got a busy schedule between work and then twins.
It is. Yeah.
And they're a handful too, but in a good way.
It's much better, Mark. When they were little, it was rough. It's gotten better and better every year, which is what people have told us. I think this big transition to public school, I think we're all going through a transition right now.
Yeah.
I think maybe one of them, maybe both of them aren't quite sure they're ready to grow up, right? To become big girls.
I think they'll like it once they experience it.
Yes, yeah.
And they're doing it, but they're doing it together.
They are doing it together. This year, there's only one transitional kindergarten class, so they will be together. We do speech class, and so I'm hoping that they'll be separated at speech class.
Okay.
And then next year, I would highly encourage the school to separate them. I think the school would want to separate them anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
They're not going to want to be.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to end it there. And I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of learning.
Yes.
A lot of different things I'm going to have to look up just to basically understand what you told me.
Well, shoot me an email, ask me any questions.
Yeah,
I'll do
perfect.
my best to answer.
Perfect. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed it.
I want to thank my guest, Hilary Beck, for coming on to the show. Thank you to my producer, Sam Lubman, for doing an awesome job putting these podcasts together. Make sure to like, comment, share this podcast, tell your friends about it, and thank you for listening. I really, really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.